Welcome back to Jurassic World. After the unfortunate events that occurred back in 2015, which caused the original park to shut down, I have been tasked with showing the investors of Jurassic World that a dinosaur theme park really can be a success, without the dinosaurs getting out and eating all the guests this time. I will have 100 days to rebuild Jurassic World, capturing many of the escaped dinosaurs from Isla Nublar and opening the gates once more, so that our guests can enjoy the beauty of our previously extinct animals once again. But could life really be contained, or will it, as always, find a way? Well, to find out, we're gonna have to go back to day one. Welcome to Isla Nublar, the site of not only Jurassic World, but previously Jurassic Park also. This majestic island, located 120 miles west of Costa Rica, was the perfect place to house dinosaurs, as long as you could stop them escaping and murdering all your guests, that is. Upon arrival on day one, the park was in ruins. Not only was everything offline power-wise, but dinosaurs were roaming the island freely, such as these Brachiosauruses. However, after putting down a power generator and a response team, I was able to tranquilize the Brachiosaurs. I then went about repairing a nearby enclosure, which would be able to house them, along with our existing Parasaurolophus, who were already in there. As my ranger team got to work on repairing the walls, I asked for the Brachiosaurs to be transported, and as soon as we had a working exhibit up and running, we could start to welcome our first guests back into Jurassic World, and we were going to need them as we were already running out of money. You see, our investors were not full of confidence that Jurassic World could be saved, and thus we had only been given a small budget of about 1.5 million at the start of this journey, and the worrying thing was that this was already gone thanks to repairs and hiring new staff. But this is where contracts would come in handy. Contracts were extra objectives given to me by an external team, and if I could complete them, I would get some extra cash. I chose the extra guests in the park one, as I knew that our monorail was about to be repaired, which was going to increase guest footfall a lot. This, combined with our Brachiosaurs, who were now awake and in their new enclosure, meant that the park was making some good progress. I could see on the management dashboard that our guests were very unhappy with the lack of shelter coverage, which is not to run and hide from the rain, by the way, but rather the threat of escaped dinosaurs. So I duly obliged and placed a shelter next to our one and only open exhibit at this stage. I then repaired the visitor centre, which was an iconic attraction of the original Jurassic World. It may have cost me $300,000 to repair, but this was worth it, as it attracted guests from far and wide, which meant that more ticket sales would be made, and ultimately more money would be in our pockets. Our Brachiosaurs appeared to be settling in well, and I watched one of our jeeps checking in on them, and the feedback from the ranger team was that they wanted a little bit more forest, so I did my best to accommodate this. The main high street of Jurassic World was starting to come together again. However, a lot of the buildings were still very much out of order, so I decided to spend a large majority of my money repairing them all, with the hope that this would bring in more guests, which appeared to be working, as the guest numbers certainly seemed to be increasing. I checked in on our Parasaurs, who seemed to be enjoying life, filled up our response facility with more fuel, which cost a depressing amount of money, by the way, and checking our park rating, I could see that we had a lot of things to improve on if we wanted to grow the amount of guests in the park. When our first income statement came through, I could see that we were making a nice tidy profit of 208k, which was a good start, but we were going to need a lot of cash to truly get Jurassic World back off the ground. And it's a good job that I learned about the power of the camera. It turns out that getting in a jeep and taking a picture of your dinosaurs could actually raise quite a bit of money, so if I was ever really low on money, this would be a good option to raise some more funds. I took a quick trip down our high street to see what was going on, and realised a fair few of our buildings had gone offline as we now had no power left, so I made up a new generator which would help to power everything once more, as well as the existing one. With the response unit now powered once more, I began to repair another enclosure, ready for when we had some more dinosaurs ready to capture. I then filled up our fuel and decided to dive a little bit deeper into our finances to work out what exactly we needed to do to bring in those ticket sales, as we desperately needed money. As luck would have it, I was about to get a nice injection of cash when our investors agreed to launch a worldwide marketing tour, which helped us not only to gain 25% publicity rating, but also a massive $1 million. And with that money, I sent our response teams out to repair the remaining facilities, which still needed repair, so that our guests had plenty of options for various types of entertainment, whether that be food, drink, the cinema, or a spa experience. You name it, my new and improved Jurassic World was going to have it. I then made the decision to try and transport my Brachiosaurs into this new exhibit that I'd been preparing, as meeting their needs alongside the Parasaurs was proving challenging. However, this soon turned out to be a mistake, as I realised this enclosure wasn't fully secure yet, and I was yet to be granted planning permission by my investors for that area of the park. So one humiliating and costly trip later, the same brachiosaur found itself being transported back to the very same enclosure that it had originally come from. In better news, however, Jurassic World had now achieved the mighty 2-star rank, and another section of the destroyed Isla Nublar had opened up to me. At first, I thought this was good news, until I realised that every single enclosure was absolutely utterly decimated, everything was out of power, and there were dinosaurs on the loose everywhere, which the guests didn't appear very happy about. Not ideal. Another problem was that it was pretty clear that the £4 million that I'd now racked up was not going to last me very long at all. The first thing that I decided to do was repair the power plants, as this would provide power to the entire park and mean that I would have to stop filling up the generators every 5 minutes. The income report that arrived that day was actually very favourable, but my outgoings were about to increase significantly. I began to repair enclosures that needed repairing and tranquilise dinosaurs that could possibly be a threat to guests, so they could be transported to a safe enclosure to be viewed safely. These included some Triceratops, which would be an excellent addition to the park, as well as a pair of Stigmaloches, who I named Ben and Karen, which seemed a very fitting name for these very angry dinosaurs. Our first Triceratops then arrived, whom I named Big Mike, and then spent the entire day trying to tranquilise as many dinosaurs as possible to stop them from free roaming around my now completely open park. As much as my guests enjoyed the sight of a Triceratops, I don't think they would have been too thrilled to see them if they had begun to charge down the main high street at them. However, despite my best efforts, it had become clear that I was not going to be able to save all of these animals, as one of our Gallimimus died to diseases. In fact, quite a few of my animals appeared to be ill or had some sort of problem with their environment, and everything was becoming quite overwhelming. Our profit was starting to drop, as the guests were not so impressed with the unhappy dinosaurs, some of which were still roaming free, and to make matters worse, that night a rainstorm hit. Jurassic World up until this point had been a pretty bare bones operation as we looked to get back up and running, but it was clear now that I was going to need some more staff. So I did just that, and with the staff I was able to research the Paleo Vet, aka a vet for dinosaurs. I watched our new veterinary team treat our Ankylosaurus with medicine, while watching the beautiful sight of our new capture team hard at work transferring this Triceratops to their new exhibit. It turns out though that we did not have all the treatment answers immediately, and I was going to have to research individual treatments so that we could help to keep all our dinosaurs healthy, which was another expense to add to our books. Still, it was certainly a necessary evil to help my dinosaurs stay healthy. But by far the star dinosaurs that I had managed to capture and safely enclose, for now at least, was my pair of Allosaurs, who I named Henry and Ralph. These two would be the star attractions of the park for now, and would hopefully help to bring guests in droves. All this building meant that I was suddenly going to need a lot of power, mainly on all of these fences of course, so I had to research a power station so that I could add additional ones if needed. I then decided to get down and dirty and have Jurassic World's new CEO apply the medication to these sick dinosaurs. Apparently though, they forgot to tell me how to actually drive the medical truck.
You know where you're going?
Yeah.
As I made an absolute fool of myself.
Is there any way through?
Oh, God, there could be.
After running over about 10 guests and almost writing the vehicle off, I finally made it into the enclosure, where I was thankfully a much better shot than I was driver, as I safely administered the necessary medication to our sick Ankylosaur. While some dinosaurs were still adjusting, our new Triceratops army were all settling in very nicely. Of the new arrivals, I decided to name this one Big Suze, to go nicely with Big Mike himself of course. But very quickly, I just wanted to tell you guys that Dinosaur World, my very own dinosaur business, is running a huge January sale. If you like some of the dinosaurs that you see in this video, then you will love what we have here at Dinosaur World, as we have plenty of official Jurassic World merchandise such as soft toys, board games, and so much more to offer. On top of this, I have decided to reward you, the Rampy Army, with a 10% discount. By using the code January10 at checkout, you will get yourself 10% off your order as long as it's over £20. Not only will you be supporting the channel by ordering from Dinosaur World, but also be supporting a newly launched small business, so all the support is really appreciated. With all that said, let's go back to saving Jurassic World. There were still plenty of dinosaurs to capture though, which was causing progress to slow as far as our star rating growth for the rebuild of Jurassic World. But there truly was a lot to attend to. After tranquilizing some more dinosaurs ready for transport, I successfully managed to power everything that I needed for now, using pylons and small substations, which also included the next monorail station, which would allow the guests to apparently get about the park easier. Personally, I thought that these were some of the laziest guests I've ever seen, but remember guys, the customer is always right. I was certainly growing into my role as the saviour of Jurassic World, and things were starting to look up. I began to repair the back exhibits of the park, where a pair of Carnotaurs lurked, who I decided to knock out while I made sure their exhibit was Carnotaurus proof. There was also a random Triceratops who had somehow managed to avoid being eaten in this case, so I had that knocked out and transported over to the rest of our trikes. The injuries and illnesses though just kept racking up. My brachiosaurs were all getting ill due to me struggling to get the right balance between forest and tall nut trees for them, and the Triceratops then had to have surgery after sustaining a major fracture while fighting with its own kind. But while I let our expert medical teams deal with that issue, I decided to do some park maintenance, such as repairing park fences and extending our electricity coverage across the entire park. Dazzler the Triceratops was now ready to be transported after successful surgery, and I then checked in on our tranquilized Carnotaurus over here, who I promise you is actually alive. Turns out he just had to be tranquilized because he was very angry over not having enough sand in his enclosure, so I added some more in for him. I then moved some of my hotels around the park because hotels are good as they bring in lovely money, and also dinosaurs can be viewed from the windows, which guests are a big fan of. So I moved them close to our big star dinosaurs so the guests could get a good view. As we began day 10 on our 100-day journey to rebuild Jurassic World, our Carnotaurs had now woken up, and they were looking very happy with their new sandy environment. I decided to name this one Monty, and we'll see a little bit more of him later. One of our hotels needed to have a path going up to it, so I added one and then realised that our lucky guests of said hotel had a great view of an Allosaurus taking a nap. 10 days in and Jurassic World had made huge strides, but we still had a long way to go to return the park to its glory days. The park rating was on the rise though, and we had reached 3-star, which was a big goal of our investors. One interesting thing though, that while our rating was rising, income was pretty steady at about 300 to 350k, as while we had more guests in the park now, we also had far more expenses and far more creatures to take care of. But reaching 3-star rank opened up more of Isla Nublar to us, which apparently meant that all of our existing dinosaurs could now also contract new diseases, which wasn't very nice at all. But it also meant trouble. Serious trouble. Wandering the wilds of Isla Nublar, I found a pack of velociraptors, and if these found their way to the guests, we were going to be in some serious legal trouble. And we had more problems coming our way apart from the raptors. The first major problem was that all dinosaurs in Jurassic World were starting to contract tuberculosis. I didn't even have the treatment unlocked, and this airborne disease was spreading like wildfire. And another rather large issue was that I'd also apparently found the T-Rex from Jurassic World, who was still wandering about and would need to be captured as a matter of urgency.
Say again. We have a T-Rex.
I sent over a capture team to help us tranquilize the Rex, but it was just one disaster after the next. That night, as I tried to deal with my disease outbreak, an army of raptors on the loose and a T-Rex, who I suspected may also be ill, a storm broke out at the worst possible time, and I spent an entire evening repairing fences so that my dinosaurs didn't break out and eat my guests, who were already unhappy because my dinosaurs were ill. I knocked out all the raptors and the Rex, but the reality was I didn't have an enclosure suitable to transport them to just yet. So while they were asleep, I decided to repair some fences and begin to build them an enclosure, as I thought that I had the time to do so. This turned out to be a fatal mistake. I also had to deal with the major fracture of one of my Parasaurolophuses, who had apparently got this during the storm, not quite sure how that had happened, and then sort out the pathing to my various hotels so that my guests could enjoy the view. I was finally getting around to securing my Tyrannosaurus enclosure so that he could be awakened from his slumber when I received this devastating news. Our star attraction, the one that was about to send attendance through the roof, was dead. I had single-handedly managed to kill the iconic Rex from the Jurassic Park and Jurassic World franchise. So right now, I think in the comments below, you should write Rampy killed Rexy. It did die from an infected wound, which was most likely caused by the fight with the Indominus Rex, but I certainly should have had this looked at, and I was now suffering. This was a truly devastating blow, but all I could do was get the dead Rex transported out of here before too many guests realised what had happened, and then go back to dealing with the raptors, who were already causing major issues of their own as I caught them attacking a Stegosaurus. This was a pretty stupid idea of the raptors in the first place, to be honest, and we just ended up with 2 dead raptors. From one disaster to another, my investors were not best pleased with me, and how we had failed to adapt to the big leagues, so to speak. And after working on repairing some more fences, that was pretty much a full-time job on its own at this point, the bad news just continued to come, as I found this Baryonyx wandering the wild, which was now dead also. I didn't even know this thing had actually existed, to be honest, but another high-value carnivore was now dead. And then to make matters worse, our Allosaurs now had tuberculosis and were also about to die, although in this case I was fortunate enough to reach it in time and send our medical team out to deal with it. However, the good news didn't last long, as the Velociraptors had now woken up and finally escaped. I got down to this one just in time to see it murder one of our park workers. I did send out a capture team after as soon as possible, but the raptor still had time to get a nice quick double kill of this guest and park worker, which was followed by another kill, as I watched my capture team miss shot after shot. Like, honestly, I was about to fire them on the spot when they did finally headshot the raptor and it went out. So a hefty legal bill later, and I found myself finally prioritising an exhibit for the raptors. After transporting them all in, I realised that just like the Rexes, they may also be ill, so I prepared to send out a team to scan them and make sure. As I had finally moved the raptors over, it meant that the Stegosaurus, who had already murdered 2 of my raptors, was enjoying his new enclosure. At least it was, until I found a Stego decide to smash through the fence and start rampaging down the street. It was now day 20, and it was safe to say that my park safety rating had taken a massive nosedive. After the raptor incident, to have a Stego rampaging towards my guest was not exactly ideal. Apparently, my Apatosaurus was also a danger to the guests, most likely because there was still a hole in its enclosure, so I sent out a team to tranquilize it. I decided that I was going to move the parasaurs over to the future Apatosaurus exhibit because managing the needs of them alongside the brachiosaurs was becoming challenging due to their different needs of vegetation. I then had to change the nature of the Stegosaur exhibit as it was lacking quite a bit of what they wanted, which is why they got angry and broke the fence down in the first place, to be fair to them. It turns out that happy dinosaurs are well-behaved dinosaurs. Our gyrosphere attraction, which allows guests to see the dinosaurs up and close and adds extra transport rating, had also been broken since we reopened Jurassic World, and I attempted to get it back online, but couldn't quite figure out exactly how yet. I had named the Apatosaur Littlefoot after Land Before Time, and he was now finally ready to live in our next live exhibit though. So after naming him and finishing the final touches to his enclosure, he was ready to be shown off to the public. I then realised that Karen the Stegosaurus was ill, and I was seriously low on paleovets, so I did decide to place down another right next to the Stegosaur exhibit. I also assigned the vet to all nearby exhibits, which would mean that the vet would be sent off automatically every time a dinosaur got ill. I decided that I would actually treat Karen the Stegosaurus myself though, and thankfully I had got a little bit better at driving the paleo truck this time, and I did successfully apply the treatment myself once more. And in even better news, I'd finally worked out how to work the gyrosphere track, and I connected it to the entrance. There were a couple of the tracks out in the wild that still need to be linked, but once I'd linked them, we had a fully powered gyrosphere attraction. For now, the visible dinosaurs on this route may not set the world alight, but the plan was to get our star attractions on this route at some point in time. And the good news just seemed to keep on coming. For about 2 minutes before tuberculosis started to break out once again in the park. I also found Steve the Carnotaurus, who had been tranquilized with a half-a-car door next to him, so I had a good theory as to why this might be. His sleeping position was also rather interesting. Monty, however, was being very much the calm statesman that he is and having a nice drink. The park was now consuming a lot of power, so I had to construct another small power station to add some extra power. I then finally remembered to transfer our poor sleeping parasaurs over to their new exhibit, which would also be good as they would be viewed by the gyrosphere. I then made the rather alarming discovery that lots of our shops and stalls were actually making an alarming loss, which was no doubt affecting our sustainability as a business. The investors would not be happy with this, but before I could deal with this, I realised that due to our growing number of dinosaurs, the number of response teams I had would need to be upped. I then also realised that some of our electricals were being powered by generators, which was not good as they cost fuel to be filled up, but before I could deal with that, our latest financials came across. We were still making some decent profit, but our expenses were holding us back. We needed some bigger, scarier dinosaurs. More teeth, you might say.
We need more. What? We need more teeth.
But before we could focus on more teeth, I had some other dinosaurs still in the wild that needed to be tranquilized and moved. So that is exactly what I did, to increase the park rating a little bit. I also decided to expand our brachiosaur exhibit as they needed a little bit more space. The only problem was that I hadn't unlocked level 5 fences yet, which meant that if they did get mad, there was a good chance they could crush the fence. Hopefully it wouldn't come to that though. Our tranquilized dinosaurs were now ready to be transported, and first of these was another stego, which was an easy one to transport as we already had a suitable enclosure ready for him to join his kind. And then next up was a new species, the Sinoceratops. It wasn't the most high profile dino in the park for sure, but it was another attraction to display, for now at least, until we got some better dinosaurs. And talking of dinosaurs, it appeared that putting down those weaker fences to increase the size of my brachiosaurs exhibit had been a mistake. In trying to give them a better life, I had only angered them more, and they had now smashed down my fence, which was not good for my publicity rating at all. I couldn't even build a new one because it was apparently too closely located to the brachiosaurs, so instead I sent the ranger team out to repair them. And it appeared that this wouldn't be the last bit of trouble I'd have to deal with this day, as my newly captured apatosaur, who was going to be Littlefoot's companion, died to disease. It was a disappointing blow, especially after I was trying to get over the loss of our T-Rex. I delivered the last parasaur to its new exhibit with Littlefoot, and then checked out what the brachiosaurs were missing. Turns out they just wanted a small amount more tall nut, and then they would duly stop breaking down my fence, so I of course went out of my way to provide them with that before the finalising of the transportation of the last wild dinosaur left in Jurassic World, which was our final Sinoceratops. Working on restoring power to our very final enclosure meant that we now had a completely empty and powered dinosaur enclosure ready for use, although it would be a little while until it came into use. On day 30, one of my scientists was now fully disgruntled, and I was getting told there was a serious risk of sabotage. Now, we couldn't be having any Dennis Nedry situations going on here, so I did the sensible thing, and fired him on the spot. Take that, Yasin. Of course, I would now need to replace him, so I hired in some more scientists in his place, which I was going to need as I was in serious need of my scientists as I had an incredible amount of items to research. I would have to research items or species if I wanted to build them or dig for their fossils, and if I was going to take Jurassic World back to the glory days, this was going to be imperative. The hard work had truly only just begun. I placed down some more emergency shelters to make sure that all my guests felt safe, and as another storm came that night, I spent most of my time repairing my buildings and making sure that no dinosaurs were about to escape. The next morning I realised that I had accidentally put the Sinoceratops in with the raptors instead of his own kind. Whoops. Somehow though, our Sino had actually survived the night, so I had it knocked out and transported to its actual enclosure before it was killed. That morning I set my sights on researching the staff centre, which would allow me to hire more scientists so I could research more items. And I then realised that the Sinoceratops enclosure wasn't actually fully enclosed. It's a good job I didn't put the raptors in here. After fully enclosing the enclosure, I added some additional plants they might like, and then assigned the nearby ranger team to them to keep an eye on them. I didn't expect these dinosaurs to cause much of an issue, but with the raptors only next door, who knows. I was in the middle of placing down my staff centre so that I could hire some more staff, but then I received an urgent message about a construction accident, which was going to screw me one way or the other. In the end, I opted to do the responsible thing and investigate the accident, which cost me more money but less of a publicity rating drop. And I was about to start going through a lot of money fast. We had actually built up a really nice balance of about $14 million, but I was about to hire a ton of new staff, which was not going to be cheap. But one plan I had to increase our revenue was to finally start taking advantage of our lagoon, which up until this point had been empty, and the first thing to do was to research the lagoon hatchery. And just after doing this, I was told that the risk of sabotage was increasing, and then that my profit had dropped 23% this month, largely due to huge outgoings. While I was still researching the marine hatchery, I did have the ability to place a normal one down, and I did exactly that. The first problem was of course that I'd placed it the wrong way round, and any dinosaur that was actually released from here would be released right into the streets of Jurassic World. But then the second one was when I realised that I had zero genetics for any dinosaurs discovered. Up until this point, as I had solely focused on getting the dinosaurs from Jurassic World back on track, there had been no need to do any researching, but now I was going to need to go digging. First though, it was time to place down our lagoon hatchery, which would finally allow us to get some marine creatures back into Jurassic World. Before that could happen though, I needed to unlock the expedition centre, so I got my scientists researching everything that I needed to do before I could do this. While they researched, I checked out the park finances to see why we had dropped 18% last month. It seemed the guests were content with the dinosaurs on display, and while they would have liked bigger and badder dinosaurs for sure, I could make some serious improvements when it came to my restroom, transport and shelter coverage. At least they did like my accommodation rating, and to be fair, if I had a pool like this to swim in while looking at some dinosaurs, I would also be pretty happy. While I continued on my path of research to unlock the expedition centre, I decided to move my amenities around, as because they were all so close together, it was limiting the profit of them. I moved our smoothies amenity, which was currently making a loss each month, to a new position, and suddenly it was making huge profit. This was a big result. However, instead of focusing on the smoothies, perhaps I should have been focusing on the raptor that had somehow got out of its enclosure. Thankfully for me, it was being a very well-behaved raptor and was just sitting down and enjoying the view, so I sent out a capture team to smack it in the face with a tranq dart. Of course, our little breakout incident would not be good for the park, but at least the other raptor was just snoozing in its exhibit. This was clearly the beta raptor, of course. I moved a couple more amenities around and then finally got the expedition centre down and making. And while that was being made, I also made a new response station nearer to the raptors in case we had any more incidents, shall I say. Although it appeared that perhaps I should have been worrying about Henry the Allosaur, who was being absolutely horrid and taking doors off my jeeps as they came to check that everything was okay with him. With the expedition centre made, I was ready to send out a team to dig out fossils. I wasn't exactly sure what to search for first, and I ended up searching them out to look for some more raptor DNA, as we had of course lost 2 of our poor raptors to that stego, which to be fair was no fault of the stego. While I waited for them to come back, I took the opportunity to get some easy wins, and placed down some more shelters to improve our safety rating that was actually all having a positive effect on our park rating and income. After checking on our marine hatchery, I was reminded of our master plan to bring our marine ecosystem to life. So after the raptor team returned, I decided next we would be prioritising the DNA of a marine species. And while I waited for them to return, I decided to start researching higher tiers of fence, as I had a feeling that we were going to need them in the near future. The dig team had finally returned and had brought me back some goodies, including some Velociraptor DNA that would allow me to make my very own raptors whenever I wanted. This was an exciting day for Jurassic World, as we were now finally in a position not just to save the existing dinosaurs that InGen had created, but to make our own ones once more. I then investigated what we would need to do to be able to dig for some of the big boy marine species, but before I opened that can of worms, I sent out a team once more to look for more raptor DNA, so we had a higher percentage of the genome. But it seemed that this may have been a bad idea, as on their way out to the expedition, the scientists leaving sabotaged my park and shut down the power stations. Luckily, they were only offline for a short period of time, and none of my dinosaurs seemed to notice that the power outage had happened, but I was immediately looking for some staff upgrades to keep my seriously disgruntled staff happy, even if that did mean overworking them some more. But at least the power was now back online, and I was then forced to drive a Ranger vehicle safety away from our allosaurs with my excellent driving skills. I started to build a second staff centre so that I could hire some more scientists, but while this was happening, one of my scientists was injured, and I was presented with a choice. In the end, I ended up paying an extra $500,000 to get that publicity rating boost, as I thought that the ticket sales would hopefully earn that money back, and also keep our sabotaging scientists hopefully on side. Our new staff centre was now built, which was a good job, as I was soon going to need to recruit more scientists, as our dinosaurs were contracting new diseases all the time, and so after researching the cure for it with my remaining staff, I went ahead and hired some more. And with all these new scientists, I used them to research the fossils for medium carnivores, so I could hopefully add some more additions to the park. I then got back in my paleo vet truck and did the dirty work myself, showing my new staff what a truly amazing CEO Jurassic World has these days. Although perhaps not the smartest CEO move was not presenting my shops properly, which was costing me a lot of money each month. Simply adding some fossils, fountains and selfie stands turned a shop that was making a loss into a massive profit. Unfortunately, our fossils ended up getting stuck in customs, which meant that I had to pay $100,000 to get them out, which isn't exactly what I had in mind. When the fossils came back, I was able to take out the genome and sell the random fossils for some extra cash that the dig team had dug up. I then continued to optimise our shops, as despite having almost $15 million in the budget, things were about to get seriously expensive around here. And when you run a dinosaur-related theme park, there are perils around every corner. And some of these perils just come at you completely randomly. As I wanted to dig up our first marine fossils so that we could create some plesiosaurs, I got a message that Jurassic World apparently had some new competition on the scene. Now, I wasn't going to let that happen, so instead I paid $250,000 to claim that specific dig site. Like I said, unexpected expenses. While I waited for the marine dig team to come back, I made myself a hatchery out in the sticks away from any enclosures. I would deliver dinosaurs via transport here, and if you've never seen a helicopter deliver a pack of velociraptors before, prepare to be amazed, as that was the only creature that I had access to yet. So I decided to start incubating some eggs for our raptor pack, as it was time to expand it. That night though, a storm hit, and it was a little bit of a nightmare. Fences kept breaking down left and right, which was causing guests to panic and run into emergency shelters, causing our park rating to plummet. To be fair, if I thought there might be an Allosaurus on the loose, I probably wouldn't have been too happy either. This combined with various dinosaur injuries, risk of sabotage, and a rapidly decreasing profit per minute meant that Jurassic World was not in the best of places the next day. I also had to transport my injured ankylosaurs to Paleo Vet as they had suffered a major fracture. The dig team had now arrived back, and while the park rating slowly ticked back up, I sent them back out to look for some Ceratosaurus fossils, and then began to incubate the raptor eggs, while the remaining scientists work on extracting the remains of the plesiosaur DNA. I admired the view from one of our large hotels, and thought how amazing it would be one day when we could successfully get ourselves a mosasaur to swim in my lagoon and be visible from the hotels. But just as Jurassic World was beginning to recover its reputation once more, I caught Alpha the Raptor doing something very naughty as he broke through my fence, sustaining a major injury in the process by the way, and he was also now on the loose in the park. But I couldn't do much apart from send out the capture team to collect the raptor, repair the fence, and then look after the rest of my dinosaurs who were still busy getting injured themselves, which meant I had to build a full new paleomedical facility, which is where Alpha the raptor was delivered so he could get his treatment for the major fracture that he had from smashing through the fence. And while Alpha was getting treated, I moved the raptors from the hatchery into the enclosure to keep Beta company. I had no idea that this was going to be a very bad mistake. And while carnage was about to kick off back at the park, I sent out a quick dig team to search for fossils for the Compsognathus, or the Compy, which you just can't go wrong with as it gets on with just about every dinosaur. But back at the park, after I transported an ankylosaur back to its enclosure after its treatment was finished, and then got Alpha the raptor's treatment underway also, no sooner had I done this before I was called right back to the ankylosaurs who were fighting again. It was safe to say that I was getting pretty sick of our ankies, as they were just constantly getting injured from fighting each other. And they weren't the only creatures to be fighting, as I watched our new raptors getting introduced to Beta, who was the current Alpha, considering Alpha was in the treatment room of course. However, without her bigger, badder brother to back her up, Beta lost the fight, and thus control of the raptor pack had shifted, which was pretty bad timing for the returning Alpha. Guess that's what happens when you bust through an electrical fence. The dig team were now back, so I uncovered the Cerato DNA and got the scientists to start extracting it, before I placed a fish feeder down ready for our first marine creatures, and editing some of our last amenities, which despite the floating in the air, these were now getting a little bit of profit. Before I could make us a plesiosaur, however, I still had to extract more DNA, so I got my scientists to work on that while I researched some of the remaining feeders that I would need. I checked back in on Alpha, who as him and Beta were happily reunited, but we did see him unable to retake his title as Alpha of the pack back, which was a shame for him. With enough plesiosaur DNA to finally make myself some plesiosaurs, I could not wait to get all those 5 eggs incubated. Marine creatures were sure to be popular with our guests, and it was time that I made use of the old Jurassic World lagoon, which once upon a time had housed the gigantic mosasaur. Not sure what happened to that, by the way. And while those eggs were incubated, I researched the genome for medium carnivores, as I was working my way up the carnivore ladder, so that hopefully soon I'd be able to dig for some of the biggest theropods to ever walk the earth. I was just checking some things out important on Alpha when the latest park finances came through. Things were looking good and profit was solid, even if our highest profit had come way back when we actually had less dinosaurs, but that of course is all because our upkeep was so much higher now. I was also given a new contract to increase the dinosaurs in our park, which given we were about to release the plesiosaurs, seemed a good one to take. And even better as our dig team were back with the Compy DNA, so I got them to work on extracting that, and then I would be able to synthesize a huge batch of Compy eggs. My staff stats were getting a little bit outdated, so I spent a bit of time and money training them up to be a bit better. Oh, and by now, if you were wondering, I had worked out how to rest my staff also, which meant that the risk of sabotage was pretty much none, even if I did have to pay them $75,000 to rest them each time. That is one expensive nap. With plenty of dinosaur DNA now, I was not messing around and got to work on a batch of ceratosaur eggs, as these dinosaurs were actually very good pals with the allosaurs, and would happily coexist with each other. It was now time to release the plesiosaurs, and they were thoroughly enjoying the new lagoon all to themselves. Of course, it wouldn't stay like this forever, but for now they could have the full run of the place. After I finished admiring them for a while, our ceratosaurs were ready to go, and after they were airlifted into their new exhibit, I admired them as they got settled in. Now, this is where things took a little bit of a turn for the worse for Jurassic World, as I hadn't quite realised what I had unleashed here. You see, it appeared that this DNA I was using for these larger, scarier carnivores was a bit dodgy. So they all had the intelligent trait. This essentially meant that they would search for breakout opportunities every second they got. Not only did the Ceratos have this, but so did the Raptors. But for now, blissfully unaware of the chaos that I was about to unleash, I extracted the remaining Raptor DNA and then admired our 5-star park stats, and saw our top dinosaur was the Allosaurus. It was clear though that we needed to get some bigger dinosaurs in the park to really drive those sales through the roof, but with that also came major risk. But at least our plesiosaurs were doing great, and with a pretty solid appeal rating also, I was very happy with our new marine additions. I decided to research the piscivore fossils so that I could dig for fossils such as the baryonyx, but after doing this I was quickly dragged away to chaos. You see, Barry the ceratosaur had clearly decided he wanted out, and his breakout target had been identified. With little I could do, I watched as Barry smashed through an electrical fence in one hit, and he was soon on the loose. This was not ideal to say the least, although luckily for me the capture team did immediately send Barry for a nap, and things would go back to normal again. Oh, hang on a minute, the other ceratosaur is also breaking out. Like I mentioned earlier, this intelligent trait was about to cause some serious chaos. With our spending commitments currently so high, I could not afford to lose guests. Interestingly, it appeared that our second Cerato had helped himself to a nice snack of a famous guest, and I was actually offered 2.5 million for this. However, this sounded pretty dodgy, and bearing in mind the previous owners of Jurassic World had let a rampaging hybrid dinosaur on the loose, I could not afford to ruin the park's reputation. So I turned the offer down and paid out 250k to the family, like the nice guy that I am. But things only continued to get worse, as it appeared that this Cerato only ate rich guests, as another famous fatality was recorded in Jurassic World. I was bleeding money left, right and centre, and I did finally get round to replacing all the electrical fences on the Cerato enclosure with some stone wall ones, as these were the maximum security fences I could get, but by the time that had happened, it was too late. The park finances had dropped, and they were not looking good. We were now making a loss, and our park rating was on the absolute floor. The investors were not happy, and for the first time I felt like I had some real pressure on my shoulders. Before you knew it, everything was going wrong. Enclosures were breaking left, right and centre, and just as I was finally getting around to replace the fences, I'd had both ceratosaurs and now velociraptors on the loose all the time. Profit plummeted, and in the space of 2 days, I'd pretty much gone through $5 million in lawsuits, new fences, and simply losing money because guests were too scared to come to Jurassic World. It was nothing short of a disaster, but I had no choice but to keep pushing on and hope that I could finally sort things out. After all the animals were put back in their enclosures, I got to work on extracting the DNA for our biggest creature yet, the one that would hopefully turn the reputation of Jurassic World around, the Tylosaur. This was going to be our new star attraction of Jurassic World, but the problem was I was still absolutely bleeding money. The amounts of breakouts in the past few days had sent my security rating to the floor, and it would take a little bit of time for Jurassic World to rebuild its reputation again. On day 50, as we reached the halfway point in this journey, I got to work on incubating some compy eggs, so I could at least get the money from that contract they had offered me. But I now found myself spending money on the most crazy stuff, such as removing a phone from our Ceratosaur's stomach after it had swallowed a guest whole. In the raptor paddock, they had frantically been trying to escape my stone walls, but luckily for now at least, they seemed to actually be contained. I spent pretty much all of my remaining balance researching the dig sites for the Suchomimus fossil, as I wanted to make myself an exhibit in Jurassic World, showcasing both the Baryonyx and Suchomimus as they went well together. Perhaps not my smartest use of money. The other Cerato had also managed to swallow a phone, which meant that they were both currently not on show to my guests. Wasn't quite sure how to sell this one, as couldn't exactly put up a sign saying, "Sorry, no Ceratosaurus today, it ate one of your fellow guests." Anyway, our army of compies was now finally ready to be delivered, so I sent them off to the completely empty exhibit that was waiting for them. And by the time I did so, Barry the Ceratosaur was ready to be transported back to his exhibit. Quick moment to pay my respects to Steve and Monty the Carnotaurs, who had been on their absolute best behaviour so far. Our compies were now beginning to be transported to their exhibit, and I was happy that we'd have at least a no-problem dinosaur with these, or so I thought. I then sent out the dig team to the Isle of Wight to look for Baryonyx fossils, and then got things in motion to research some more marine reptiles, so we continue our work on the mosasaur. The new contracts had also landed, and as the growing family one didn't quite work out when a few of these compy eggs failed to incubate, I took a new one to keep my dinosaurs disease-free. An extra 1 million at this stage would come in real handy. The minute I had the funds, I began to synthesize a Tylosaur egg, who I hoped would be our new star attraction. I then witnessed our escape artist raptors try and escape over and over again and probably injure themselves. I wasn't quite sure if they actually had a way out or not, to be honest, and if they would somehow find a way over the best protected fences that I could possibly get, but I certainly hope not, as if they could, I'd be probably screwed. That night, as I checked in on our Triceratops and the other dinosaurs around the park, I received the news that we had successfully completed the saving of Jurassic World, and finally got that 5-star rating that the investors were so desperate for. But I wasn't done there. We might have brought Jurassic World back to life, but I was going to make it thrive like never before. So the hard work continued, but it was going to be costly. So I set about trying to make sure that we could bring in as much money each month as possible, and began by adding more amenities, strategically placing them next to our popular dinosaur exhibits. Just as I had been complimenting Monty and Steve the Carnotaurs on their good behaviour, I caught Monty trying to escape through a weak link in our fences, so he was tranquilised while I fixed the fence and made it stronger. But now it was time to reveal the star attraction of Jurassic World, the Tylosaur. With a whopping appeal rating of 1,661, the Tylosaur was our new most popular creature by far, and it was hopefully going to keep our guests very, very happy. And in even better news, it wasn't even going to eat the plesiosaurs, which meant that they could all coexist together happily ever after. I was about to move this shopping amenity that was making a loss each month, until I suddenly realised that there were some compies running around my park. I wasn't quite sure how these things actually got out, but I immediately asked for them to be tranquilized. Unfortunately though, that same day I got a financial report, and shock horror, it appeared that guests didn't like the armies of compies running around the park. They clearly watched Jurassic Park: The Lost World. So as the rain came in, I rather unexpectedly found myself fortifying the compy exhibit, which wasn't something that I thought I would end up doing. I also added some sand for them, as I think the lack of sand was what made them upset in the first place and why they decided to escape. Despite having about 7 in total, they were still apparently lonely. So I had no choice but to make up even more compies, which at least would be good for my overall dinosaur count. I then moved my marine hatchery, which was partly so we'd be able to get a better view of the dinosaurs as they were released in the future, and we then saw Big Mike was dying. Panic over though when I realised that he had just had such a big nap he was now severely dehydrated. One of our compies had now finished being treated, so I transported it back to the enclosure, and I was then presented with our next contract offers. As I was in need of money, I took a rather contentious one of increasing the amount of dinosaur fights, as apparently guests love it when dinosaurs fight to the death. I added a bit more water to the compy's enclosure, extracted the remaining raptor DNA, which seemed to have an infinite supply of by the way, but I was just short of being able to make any baryonyxes. So while the dig team were gathering more fossils, I had the remaining scientists research improved amenities. I then checked on what I could improve on to get more guests through the door. Our new Tylosaur was a big star attraction, and was certainly driving the numbers up, but we would need plenty more dinosaurs like it if we wanted to get to the big leagues. I then did a pretty terrible thing for money, which was move a raptor to the compy exhibit, as I knew it would start a fight so I would hopefully get my contract money. I have some questionable morals, but you just can't turn down £1.8 million. That's over half a Tylosaur. The dig team had come back with a Suchomimus to be extracted, but I was excited about the next exhibit, as I was about to dig for some Giganotosaurus DNA over in Argentina. The birthplace of Lionel Messi and Diego Maradona was also at one point home to the biggest theropod to ever walk the earth. As always, there was some sort of customs problem, but there was absolutely no way that I was waiting a second longer for this very precious DNA. The latest financial reports were pretty positive, which was largely due to the fact that I had now stopped all of the dinosaurs escaping, and I checked in on Killer the Raptor to see what he was up to in the compy exhibit, as I really wanted my money. The Giganotosaurus dig team came back, and I immediately got to work on extracting the DNA. I also researched a ton more stuff, such as the viewing gallery. These special viewing galleries allow guests to be inside the enclosure with the dinosaurs and gives them a really close-up view that they otherwise wouldn't have got. I continued to extract the Giga DNA, but I was clearly going to be a bit short still, so back the dig team went to Argentina to fetch me the rest. I was a little bit unsure how this connection to the viewing gallery was working, especially as the building appeared to be floating over the water, but here at Jurassic World we clearly have not changed and adopted the fun first, safety later approach that has worked so well in the past. I was busy placing down and organising my cracking new sushi parlour when I got a report that there was a possibility of a dinosaur inside one of my restrooms, because clearly, as Ian Malcolm says, when you go, you gotta go. I decided it best to evacuate the restroom just in case this was actually the case. Our new water area was looking very fine indeed, and our guests were treated to a fantastic view of the Tylosaur as it swam right by. The new compies were ready to release, even if they did have a raptor for company right now, but the big news was that our Giganotosaur genome was ready.
Someone has to fucking flip the burgers, dumbass.
Of course, we couldn't actually do anything just yet, as I was now extremely poor and couldn't afford to even create an egg. So instead I focused on maximising our amenities coverage and placing them all over our existing attractions. This was a great success in bringing in a little bit more revenue through the door. But it was now time to create the Giga Egg, and I was slightly worried to see there was a 75% chance it would have the intelligent gene, which meant that it could break out, but how bad could that really be? I chose to go with the 2022 Jurassic World Dominion model, as I actually liked that model and I think it was one of the few good things about that movie. And while I waited for it to raise more money to synthesize the egg, I placed some viewing areas in all of our enclosures that didn't currently have them. I also decided to transport Killer the Raptor back to his old enclosure with the other raptors, as all he had currently done was kill my assets without awarding me any of that promised money, which I'm pretty sure is because the compies didn't actually fight back. Of course, I still had to have a dinosaur that was able to win 3 successful fights so that I'd be able to unlock the T-Rex genome later down the line. While I made sure that every single enclosure had the best seating in the house available, I was also working on extracting a lot of DNA. I have been out digging for Suchomimus DNA and also Amargasaurus DNA to add a little bit more species variety to the park, as not every creature could just be a big, mean, scary carnivore. Our Giga was ready for transportation now, so I instructed the team to bring him over. I was slightly apprehensive about the idea of a helicopter transporting an 8,000 kg $3 million asset over, but luckily I had things to distract me, like the sad death of Ralph the Allosaur, who had died of old age. With our latest apex predator about to be unveiled, I was already preparing for the next, as I sent out an expedition team for the mighty cost of $2 million to dig for mosasaur DNA. I also then extracted all of my leftover DNA, and then got ready for the grand revealing of the new star attraction of Jurassic World, our very own Giganotosaurus. I tried to view the unveiling from the log, but apparently I couldn't do this as you can only look one way in the log, which didn't really quite make sense, but oh well. I would be perfectly happy to witness it from the ground. Now, I really thought I'd bring the excitement with the introduction of our Giganotosaurus by placing him in the middle of the Sinoceratops exhibit, which had pretty much everything to do with unlocking that genome for the Rex. Although my first issues with Ryan, the now named Giganotosaur, was that he seemed to be very intently checking out the fencing of his enclosure, but it was solid concrete wall, so I was pretty sure that even Ryan wouldn't be able to get through this. Our Suchomimus gene was actually finished before our baryonyxes, so I had a few of these eggs synthesizing and then extracted our Mosa DNA, which had very excitedly returned from the dig site. Of course, it wasn't enough DNA to just actually make a Mosa yet, but I was confident that with Ryan now in the park, we'd be able to drive up more ticket sales and get a load of cash in, no problem at all. And it didn't take Ryan too long to make his first impact, as I witnessed him kill a Sinoceratops just like that. But the next time I checked on him, he was rather suspiciously sitting right next to a damaged wall after injuring himself. The paleomedical team were a little bit apprehensive about our new attraction, so I decided to just do it myself. And luckily I was a little bit of a master by this at this point, and even got to witness Ryan facing off against the remaining Sinoceratops, who I gave a little health boosting injection to, just to give the guests a bit more entertainment for a bit longer. With life at Jurassic World seemingly going well, and revenue back on the up once more, I got back to sorting out our amenities, as these things could really bring in a lot of money if you place them correctly. On day 65, one of our Triceratops died of old age. This was starting to become a reoccurring issue for many of Jurassic World's original dinos that had been captured once more. But it wasn't just that I was having issues with, as I caught Ryan attempting to smash through our walls. It looked like that he was actually about to be successful this time, but luckily a ranger team arrived and repaired the wall just in time, and Ryan walked away defeated. Disaster had been avoided. For about 5 seconds, that is. As when I was just checking my minimap later that day to monitor our dinosaurs, I found Ryan walking down the street right into a pack of guests. This was an absolute disaster. We had already been running our park finances close to the edge, and that was before a gigantic theropod dinosaur got on the loose. Quickly, as word spread about how unsafe Jurassic World remained, our finances slipped into negative, and I was given a mighty 3 minutes to prove to our investors that we could get back into profit, or they would close the gates on Jurassic World for good. We did manage to get Ryan knocked back out at least, after he had a few guests for his breakfast of course, and I was so broke that I couldn't even afford to get my poor Sinoceratops the treatment that he needed. How this thing had even lived for this long considering it was in an enclosure with Ryan, I wasn't too sure. As 3 minutes was just about to run out, I was in desperate need of some cash. It went right down to the wire, but eventually after demolishing some feeders, I was able to scrape just back into a positive cash flow once more and avoid bankruptcy. The dinosaurs might not be able to eat anymore, but at least we haven't been shut down. Please no one tell Peter, otherwise they may shut me down anyway. As our cash balance had been completely decimated by the breakout, and anything else I needed to do at this point was going to cost a lot anyway, I would have to take a back seat and hopefully let the park recover some of its reputation. Ironically, it didn't take too long to actually get our 5 stars back. I guess the danger that you may be eaten at any time actually enticed some guests. I couldn't even afford to treat Ryan yet, who had of course managed to swallow a phone, so I had a very bright idea to combine the exhibits of the Raptors and the Giga. I'm not quite sure why I decided this, but it could be because I still needed Ryan to be successful in some more fights so that I could research the next carnivore gene, or it could be that my thoughts were that Ryan would be so busy with the Raptors that he would stop trying to break out. At least it would provide some more excitement for the guests, although I wasn't sure what the Raptors were going to think of it. Unfortunately, time was up for Steve the Carnotaurus, who sadly died of old age and left poor Monty all on his own. I then extracted some more mosasaur DNA so I could create a mosasaur finally, and checked in on Ryan, who had now been agitated by the storm which had just finally arrived, and he was already planning his next breakout. I wasn't particularly sure what to do here as I watched Ryan try and smash through the wall once more, but I decided the safest thing to do was to just have him tranquilise while the storm was going on, to ensure our guests were kept safe. However, it clearly wasn't just Ryan that I should be worried about, as Karen the Stego, of course it was Karen, had broken through her fence for the second time, which meant that dinosaurs were on the loose once more and the park finances were back in the negative again. I had the stegos tranquilized and moved over to the apatosaur exhibit, as I was actually too poor to repair their fences. It turns out that managing a dinosaur theme park when you find yourself constantly running out of money is no fun at all. I did at least now have the DNA to make myself a mosasaur, which our guests had been asking for, but we were of course absolutely skint, so did not have the facilities for that, meaning our Tylosaur, who was still our star attraction, was going to have to do for now. It was pretty funny that our well-behaved Tylosaur, who hadn't caused a single issue, was our star attraction over Ryan, who was still being an absolute menace, trying to escape and attacking jeeps every single minute. Our Triceratops were continuing to die of old age, which was pretty sad, but I was preparing for this for a while now, and had our Amargasaurs ready to go, so we weren't losing too many dinos and not replacing them. Of course, Big Mike was still going, being the legend that he is. On day 72, Ryan was plotting his next escape, so I asked him to be tranquilized again, and then suddenly I received the word that I'd been waiting for. The investors had told me that Jurassic World was now sustainable again, and they were ready to commit long term. This was a slightly strange timing from them, considering our finances were still in the absolute gutter, as we slipped back into the red once more. Perhaps one of the reasons behind our poor finances was that my dinosaurs seemed to be injured constantly, although perhaps that would have something to do with my decision to put my two raptors in with a Giganotosaurus. Ryan himself was of course having a great time running rings around me and the park staff, even if I did keep finding him randomly tranquilized. I sent out a dig team to get the remaining baryonyx DNA. I needed to cook up some in the lab, and then rested a few of my scientists before they unleashed Ryan and everyone in the park. Older dinosaurs were continuing to die, and many of these would be seriously missed, not least because I needed money to replace them, and money was in pretty short spare right now. Although there were serious doubts about whether I would miss carrying the Stegosaur, the orchestrator of two escapes. Ryan was pretty much being permanently put to sleep these days, which is because I had assigned a special capture team just to Ryan for every time he tried to escape. Ahead of the next storm, I decided to invest in storm defense upgrades, which I certainly should have done earlier on. One of my parasaurs was injured, so I had them taken to the vet, along with the compies, who, by the way, just seemed to be constantly injured every single time there was a storm. Pretty sure they just got blown into the fence or something, but it was pretty annoying. As Big Mike, our final Triceratops, finally bowed out, RIP Big Mike in the comments by the way, I decided to check how long our star attraction had left, but was pretty pleased to see that our Tylosaur had plenty of life left in it. The finances of the park were pretty solid for now, but we were in desperate need of some more transport, so I would have to think of a way to get this rating up when I got the chance. The baryonyx DNA had finally come back, so I got our scientists to work on extracting it so that we could have a joint exhibit for them and the Suchomimus, as they got along well together. In an effort to improve our transport situation, I had decided to come up with a little bit of a master plan, as I placed a new monorail station right by Big Ryan's exhibit. The thinking was that everyone wanted to see Ryan, and even if the station being half in the exhibit was slightly questionable safety-wise, I had to get that back. I also placed a few more shelters to improve our shelter coverage to 100%. We'd had a pretty rough time of it lately in Jurassic World, and we'd had to take a back seat to let our finances recover. Luckily though, we had amassed just over 3 million again, and it was time to incubate our Suchomimus eggs. So all our Stegosaurs had now died, I decided to turn their exhibit into a Suchomimus, and hopefully down the line, baryonyx one also. I then saw that our last remaining raptor had been hunted down by Ryan, which meant that it hadn't even got on his record as a fight. Essentially, I had just murdered some of our most valuable assets for no reason at all. An absolute Rampy masterclass. As days went by, dinosaurs continued to die, but the problem was that with so little money in the bank, I just couldn't replace them right away. Even though they weren't our highest profile dinosaurs, less dinosaurs meant less revenue, and we were in a little bit of a tight spot as we chased the highest profile acquisitions. And as I was about to welcome what I thought would be a much needed boost to the park with the introduction of our Suchomimus, I then got a report through that the handler was injured by one of our dinosaurs, and I was either going to have to pay 250k or lose 25% of my publicity rating, and things were not looking great considering that was half my budget. I knew though that I needed some quick wins to replace the dying dinosaurs, so I sent a team out to dig up some Dilophosaur fossils, which were pretty cheap. They came back with a ton of DNA for me, so I decided to extract it all and look what I could cook up ASAP. However, we got some more bad news, as Henry the Allosaur's time had come. Henry had been the star attraction of Jurassic World for so long, and his presence would be sorely missed. Perhaps it was a good job that our first Sucho had just landed, and I decided to call him James. However, I did have a little bit of a panic for a moment when I realised that our exhibit was not quite ready for a carnivore of this size. At first it was missing its desired sand, which was going to upset it, but I also still had the electric fences around the place instead of the solid concrete walls that would be able to keep the Suchomimus contained, so I had that seen to ASAP. While we were at it, I decided to do the Carnotaurus exhibit as well and beef the defences up, and as Monty, our remaining Carnotaurus, was a little bit lonely, I then sent a team to Argentina to dig up some Carnotaurus fossils. It was now time to incubate a batch of Dilophosaur eggs, as I had an empty enclosure that needed dinosaurs to fill them. Later that day, a storm ended up hitting, and I had to quickly tranquilise Ryan, as the storm managed to break the gate to his exhibit and left it permanently open. Thankfully for once, it seemed that Ryan was actually none the wiser of this, as normally he loves a chance to escape. The latest financials came in and they weren't great. Chasing the biggest, baddest dinosaurs had come at a cost, and while they weren't so good right now, I was confident that we could get them back on track in the remaining 20 days. The Carnotaurus DNA came back, so I extracted it, and then incubated even more Dilophosaur eggs, as I wanted to have an absolute army of them. I set the instructions to deliver the first 5, and while they were in the process of being delivered, I hastily made sure that their exhibit was secure, as all of these Dilophosaurs had the intelligent gene and were likely to break out if they saw an opportunity. I also put a nice log viewing area into the exhibit, and the hope was that the opportunity to view 10 Dilophosaurs when they were all ready would be a pretty attractive one for our guests. As our first Dilophosaurs arrived, I watched them all get settled in and try and escape, of course. But later that night, our fortunes were about to be turned upside down. I was offered 15 million for our highest profile dinosaur, which was of course our Tylosaur. I thought about it long and hard. Nope, scratch that, of course I took it. I needed the bloody money. With 15 million, we were able to replace all of our dead dinosaurs and more. It was time to bring Jurassic World back to life, and we had 20 days left to do it. Before you knew it, I was being offered an extra 1 million for a Dilo egg, but I did actually turn this one down for the extra publicity rating. So it was time to get to work with introducing our new dinosaurs. First up was the Baryonyxes, who were ready to go and would go in nicely with our Suchobimuses. These would be a popular addition to Jurassic World and would also make this exhibit one of our most popular ones, as guests could get a sight of 2 magnificent piscivores. I quickly replaced the last fences on the Carnotaurus enclosure, as poor Monty was lonely and liable to break out. I then checked on Monty to see that this monster was apparently 110 years old, with an expected lifespan of 89 years. We could not let this hero die alone, so I immediately got him some friends who would help to keep him company in his final days. With our big injection of cash, Jurassic World was starting to come to life again, although Monty repaid the favour of getting him some friends by swallowing a little piece of car door. Even at 110 years old, even when injured, Monty was not prepared to give over his alpha status without a fight, but we had to knock him out anyway to take him to surgery to remove the car door. That night, a storm broke out, as it always seemed to do on Isla Nublar, and fences started to break left, right and centre, which concerned guests and concerned me. So I of course sent out the ranger teams to repair all the gates and fences. As the storm continued throughout the night, Monty's treatment was well underway, and the next morning I set about repairing the remaining damage caused by the storm. But that same day, something very exciting was happening. Introducing the new star attraction of Jurassic World, Mary the Mosasaur. With a whopping 2,500 appeal rating, this was sure to get the guests in en masse. And with one of the former stars of Jurassic World back on show, I was very proud to display our Mosasaur. Of course, with a big creature like this, I needed to add in some more shark feeders to keep her happy. As up until now, our marine creatures had been so well behaved compared to our land ones, I decided to prioritise them for a little bit when it came for digging for new creatures. So I sent a dig team out to look for the Nothosaurus, and when they came back, I immediately got our scientists to work on extracting the DNA. I then followed this up by sending another team right back out to look for some Dunkeolostris DNA. I added some rocks to our lagoon, as our latest creature that I was adding was going to enjoy these, and this was of course the Nothosaurus, whom I immediately began to incubate some eggs of. I checked in on Mary, who was adapting well to her new environment, and even more was putting on a show for our guests, which I was very happy about indeed, as I'm sure the guests enjoyed seeing a leaping mosasaur. The dig team had come back, so I got that donkey DNA extracting, and then rested a few of my scientists, as they were starting to get annoyed with me for overworking them. I had managed to amass a ton of random fossils of creature that needed to be extracted before I sent the dig team out, as my fossil condition was full. It was now time to release the Nothosaurs, who were pretty cheap to produce and would just add that extra attraction to our already popular lagoon. One of our parasaurs was pretty unwell, so I had them tranquilized so they could be treated. I then added an extra emergency shelter to make sure that safety rating was top notch. I decided to incubate 2 donkey eggs to bring even more creatures into our lagoon, and after doing that I checked in on one of our Nothosaurs, who appeared to be panicking as it came into contact with Mary the Mosasaur. I transported our parasaur to a paleovet so that it could be treated, and then released our donkey duo into the lagoon. As they got settled in, I realised I was actually able to research the large carnivores' genomes now, which I believe is funnily enough because Monty, the absolute hero, had won 3 fights against his own kind. So thanks to Monty, we were now able to dig for the mighty Tyrannosaurus Rex, even if it did take $2 million every single time to dig for DNA. In our lagoon, it appeared that we had a bit of an issue. It appeared that the introduction of our donkeys had caused all our marine animals to suffer from chronic stress. I tried to sell some of my old plesiosaurs on the black market to see if this fixed it, and see if the issue was simply that the lagoon was overcrowded. However, after giving that a little go and sending the dig team out again for some more T-Rex DNA, as even when I extracted that we didn't have quite enough to make a Rex just yet, I came to the conclusion that unfortunately I was just going to have to sell our new attractions to the donkeys, as it was upsetting Mary the Mosasaur, which appeared to be upsetting the entire lagoon. The guests would not be happy to see our star attraction stressed out, so unfortunately the donkeys had a very short-lived stay at Jurassic World. But talking of star attraction, I was concerned that apparently our Rexes had a 100% chance of the intelligent trait, which did not seem ideal considering how Ryan was. I decided that I would wait and see that as we got more percent of the genome, whether we would be able to lower the chance of this trait, as I had learnt the hard way that this intelligent trait is not to be messed with. News though was not that there was another storm on the loose breaking all my buildings, but rather that now the donkeys had gone, our marine animals had recovered from their chronic stress and were back to being happy and healthy. Our T-Rex DNA had now come back also for the 3rd time, and I was ready to extract some more to see if it had any impact on the intelligence trait. And talking of that trait, I caught 2 of our cheeky intelligent species trying to escape. First this Dilo trying to climb over the wall, and then the Suchomimus, who appear to have identified a small weak spot in our fences, so I made sure to get that patched up right away. I extracted even more Rex DNA, which by the way, with the combination of extracting and digging, was now costing me an absolute fortune. But it was worth it, especially after I killed our first Rex. But to be honest, I would happily spend all the money in the world to stop my dinosaurs from escaping, which was illustrated perfectly later on that day, on day 85, by Ryan, who had of course been unusually quiet lately, but at that time was now over, as he managed to engineer one of his breakouts again. Unfortunately though, this was arguably the worst one yet, as Ryan ran down a packed street crushing guests left, right and centre. It was bad.
Put your head between your knees.
We did eventually get him tranquilised and transported home once more for what felt like the 40th time. Somehow, by the way, we hadn't lost our 5-star rating from Ryan's little adventure, which I was a little bit confused about, and I was even more confused when I found dead Barry the Ceratosaur just dead in the outside of the enclosure in the middle of the street. Definitely the most strange thing to happen in the 80 odd days of my management of Jurassic World. So I did of course have dead Barry removed, and then had a compy tranquilised, as these things just seem to constantly get injured. The last of the original Brachiosaurs had just passed away, which marked a sad day for Jurassic World, as this was the first enclosure that we had on. But I saw this as an opportunity to reintroduce the raptors once more, after I had sort of fed the last couple to Ryan the Giga. So I got some eggs going and then reinforced this enclosure, as of course we could not afford to get these things out running around the park, as that would be an absolute disaster, and they would of course certainly have the intelligent trait also, so they would make sure to have a good go at escaping. Our Tyrannosaur genome was progressing nicely, and we went too far off 100%, as I was truly desperate to get rid of that intelligence trait, but first it was time to deliver our new raptors to the park. But before I could get too excited about the new attraction, I had to send a capture helicopter after Ryan as, well, he did it again. I've been tasked with showing the investors of Jurassic World that a dinosaur theme park really can be a success, without the dinosaurs getting out and eating all the guests this time. I sent the dig team out for what I hoped would be the final time to get that final T-Rex DNA, and then rested a lot of my scientists, as they had been very busy lately. But our raptors were now in, and I decided that I would actually expand their enclosure a little bit, as quite frankly I had the space, so why not? I checked on Ryan, who was for once in his enclosure and behaving himself, although a minute later I found that he had been put to sleep, so my guess was that he started to try and escape from his enclosure. Just classic Ryan things. I messed around with some amenities, as I wanted to make sure that I was making all the profit that I could do. For example, the food wasn't very successful in this location, but after changing it to a drink stall, we started to rake in the profit. We did have a storm that night, but for once we managed to contain Ryan in his exhibit, which was a pretty big win. Might have had something to do with the fact that we chose to knock him out for the majority of the storm, but still. On day 90, it was finally time. We were going to bring Rexy back, intelligent gene or not, and I first synthesized and then incubated the eggs. Ready for their arrival, I placed a viewing dome in the exhibit, and we were now good to go for the delivery of the Tyrant Lizard King. I made some final touches to the enclosure, and they were in. I'd like to introduce you all to Terrence and Matilda, the Rexes of Jurassic World, and they both wasted no time in being absolute menaces, attacking a jeep, and when Matilda tried to immediately break out, she was tranquilized. It was a pretty rocky start for our new attractions, but I hope that they would get better from here. Added an extra viewing log gallery into the Rex exhibit, just like the OG Jurassic World, and then removed a dead ceratosaur from their exhibit. Now we had got the big hitters into the park, we had been losing dinosaurs quite a lot to age lately, so I had to add some new species into the park, like the Orla Titan. However, I wasn't quite able to complete this job, as on her first day in Jurassic World, our new attraction Matilda had decided to escape her exhibit and treat the pathway around the lagoon as a 400-metre racetrack,
They're moving in herds.
trampling guests at her will on the way round. It was pretty clear that these Rexes were going to be serious trouble, so I came up with an ingenious way to keep them enclosed. Just built a second layer of wall. By the time they had busted through the first one, we would be notified and have time to deal with the situation. It was incredibly ugly, but also an effective way of preventing too many more guest casualties. So with that done, I could get back to incubating the eggs for our Orla Titans. And after doing that, I decided to enact my genius plan I had with the Rexes, with Ryan also, before I was dragged away for some bizarre issues. Firstly, I found a sleeping Carnotaurus in the middle of the high street, not sure exactly where he came from, and secondly, Terrence had attempted to bust through wall number 1. However, the master plan had worked, and Terrence let out a roar of anger as he realised there was a second wall behind it. Sometimes my genius astounds me. With that done, I could finally get moving our Carnotaurus back to its enclosure. Turns out there were 3 electric fences in the exhibit that I had not converted to level 5 fencing, and the Carnotaurs had made me pay. I of course fixed those before moving our Orla Titans to the exhibit where Littlefoot the Apatosaur used to be. As our Ceratosaurs had also started to die off now, I decided to cook up some more of them to be put back in their old exhibit, as currently it was just wasted space. I was then offered 1.5 million to take a photograph of 3 species at once, and I was not going to turn this opportunity down for some free money, although it turned out that getting a shot of 3 different species was actually far more challenging than I originally thought. The Rexes were pretty angry about being defeated by a pair of stone walls, so decided to take their anger out on each other and battle for Alpha. It was the battle duly won by Matilda, of course, cementing herself as the leader of the Tyrannosaur pack. The next day, round the back of the Tyrannosaur exhibit, I began to construct a new one. We had a Mosasaur, we had a Giganotosaurus, and we had some Rexes. But there was still one creature that I had in mind for Jurassic World that needs to be shown off to the public. So I began to build a large exhibit round the back, which would of course be double walled. Once this was done, I got back in my helicopter and had another go at sorting this contract out, just to give me that extra money as I was going to need it. At first, despite actually taking the photographs seeming like an infinite money glitch, I wasn't successful in getting the shot that I needed, but in the Baryonyx and Suchomimus exhibit, after tranking and moving over a singular compy, I was able to get a shot of 3 creatures, which gave me my money. And with that money, as soon as I had it ready, I researched the DNA for the final Piscivore, the Spinosaurus. This would be the final large predator that I wanted to bring to Jurassic World, even if it did cost me a ridiculous 5 million just to be able to go and even dig for the thing. So as soon as I could, I sent off our dig team to Africa, of course, to search for Spinosaurus DNA, and as soon as I got it back, I extracted it. The only problem was that this all cost quite a lot of money, but as soon as I had the DNA ready, I began to synthesize a Spinosaurus. As we approached day 100, it appeared that my investors were getting greedy, and the prospect of hybrid dinosaurs was being thrown around in talk. I wasn't going to stand for this, so in a last throw of the dice to get some more money through the gates and prove to them that hybrids were not needed, I decided to release another Tylosaur into the lagoon. These things had a similar appeal to rating to the T-Rex, and yes, I knew they may cause a little bit of stress for our creatures, but I decided it was worth the shot, as the rating just couldn't be turned down. What I did not expect, however, was on day 95 for our new Tylosaur to eat Mary the Mosasaur. I wasn't really sure what to make of this one, so I decided to do the natural thing and just double down on the Tylosaurs and create even more of them. It appeared that a lot of unexpected things were happening today, as I witnessed a gyrosphere go through a solid stone wall. But it was also time to deliver our new Spinosaurus to its new exhibit. And just as things were all going well and we're about to welcome our new addition, Terrence the T-Rex took advantage of the one weakness of our double-walled system had, which was the gate, which had managed to break during a storm, which meant that he just waltzed out through the gate and into the park. While this did add a little bit of a sour note to our big day, as we welcomed day 100 and the first actual Spinosaurus to any Jurassic Park to be seen. It was a proud moment though, and we now housed a dinosaur theme park which contained Simple the Spinosaurus, Terrence and Matilda the Tyrannosaurus Rexes, and Ryan the Giganotosaurus. Under our ownership, Jurassic World had come a long way, and I decided, before life once more found a way, I would be getting off this island and saying goodbye. Thanks all for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed my 100 days spent rebuilding Jurassic World. If you would like to see me do this sort of challenge again, perhaps in Jurassic Park, let me know in the comments below and leave a like on the video, of course, as it really does help support the channel. Thanks as always to all my Patreons for their support. If you guys want early access to every Rampy video, consider supporting me on there. In the meantime, have a great rest of your day, guys, and I will see you all soon in the next one.